Hello, everybody. I'm Ernie Broughton. I'm a senior advisor at the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, and I want to welcome you to ECI's October Best Practice Forum. Our theme today is Succeeding in the Ethics and Compliance Profession, and we've assembled a wonderful slate of panelists and speakers to guide us through this space. I first of all want to thank our sponsor, LRN Corporation. And secondly, please use the chat box and let us know where you're joining from and give you an opportunity to see if there are other people who you know. As we go through the program, I'd like for you to use the polls tab to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can. There are some excellent resources that have been provided by the ECI and LRN and Spark Consulting, and that will be found under the Resources tab or under the Files tab, which is next to the Polling tab. And finally, before you leave today in 90 minutes, please do take our quick survey, and your responses are important to us as we plan future programs. And so without any further delay, I'm pleased to announce our first segment where we will talk about a number of topical issues related to career advancement in our field. Our moderator is Ty Francis, and it's my pleasure to introduce Ty. He's widely acknowledged as an expert in corporate governance, ethics, compliance, and culture, and he's currently LRN's Chief Advisory Officer. He's launched ethics and compliance programs in forums across the United States, the UK, France, Hong Kong, Japan, Brazil, Singapore, and the Middle East. Truly an international perspective. Ty spent 13 years in New York City, where he was Executive Vice President of Global Programs at the Ethisphere Institute. And prior to that, led the corporate board member business at the New York Stock Exchange Governance Services Division. And I would say that in 2017, Ty was appointed a member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II in recognition of meritorious service to business. And I am just so impressed with that. So far beyond my reach, living in Texas, I can tell you that. But Ty, it's wonderful to have you here to moderate this session. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Ernie. That's probably the best praise I've had for a long time, because I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I'm just that guy who gives us our breakfast. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and good afternoon, and thank you for having me back. So as Ernie mentioned, my name is Ty Francis, and I'm the Chief Advisory Officer at LRN, where, amongst other things, I lead the advisory services business for the company, which includes strategic compliance program evaluations, code of conduct reinventions, rejuvenations, rewrites. We help with policy simplification, ethical corporate culture evaluations, and we also advise boards in the C-suite in their E&C obligations and oversight. Ernie's told you about my background. So today, we'll be discussing some practical career guidance for E&C professionals. This has been a growing topic of conversation for a number of years now, and many conferences I've been to. And I don't think it's been really hit on the head with some practical outcomes and some advice for people. The ethics compliance practice is evolving, and with it, skills, knowledge, abilities, and education requirements of the E&C profession has just been exacerbated. AI, machine learning, data analytics, and more broadly, compliance soft skills are going to be so crucial in terms of progressing our careers in the field. So today I'll attempt to explore these trends with my two panelists, who have a wealth of experience and are both leading practitioners in their field. They both have a broad view and sense of how employees at all levels can prepare for a rewarding career in ethics compliance, not just now, but in the long run. You know, success in E&C to a large extent depends on one's ability to develop an advisory knowledge base, but also to create and engage these energizing interactions, which with some communication and networking skill can really increase, your leverage and expertise, and inevitably, if that's where your path leads you, help compete for positions on boards. So to shower you with their wisdom, I have great pleasure in introducing Ellen Hunt. Ellen has spent the last 2 decades at AARP and Blue Cross Blue Shield as a senior executive in ethics and compliance. She's an adjunct professor at Fordham Law School, where she lectures in Corporate Compliance Foundation, and has recently just joined Christy Grant-Hart's Spark Compliance Consulting as a principal consultant and advisor. And as we mentioned in our pre-chat, probably the only person I didn't get to see at a recent compliance conference in Nevada, so I'm sure she won't let me forget that. Ellen and I actually go back probably about 7 years, where we met both in the UK and in the US, where I was an advisory board member for Women in the Boardroom, which helps women get board seats. And so Ellen and I were on round tables speaking about exactly what we're going to speak about today. Joining Ellen is David Greenberg. David is a special advisor to LRN and my former CEO. He's also been part of the ethics compliance community for about 2 decades. David started very young, in his 20s. Beginning, he was chief compliance officer at the Altria Group, then the parent company of Philip Morris, I think Kraft Foods and Miller Brewery. At the board level, though, David serves as the chair of the Corporate Governance and Risk Assessment Committee, and he's also a member of the Audit Committee of International Seaways, which is one of the largest crude oil and petroleum tanker companies, and is currently listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So, welcome both. So we're here to talk today about careers in compliance, but not just careers in compliance today, but careers in compliance in the future. And I think really now having a great resume basically isn't cutting it, especially if you want to advance in the E&C space. So as it becomes more innovative and more competitive, I wonder if we could do a bit of an icebreaker, and maybe you could share, both Ellen and David, some of your career defining and or career building moments and experiences you've had in the last 20 years. So since you're in your teens.
Ellen, why don't you go first?
Well, thank you. In thinking about that question, there's a couple of things. One was being asked to come from a legal counsel role to in the compliance role early in my career, where people really didn't know what compliance was. I was with a company that had pleaded guilty to false claims allegations, and they needed a compliance program, and they said, "Hey, Ellen, why don't you do it?" So I was kind of voluntold for that. And I think many people back in the day got into ethics and compliance as kind of a volunteer activity. But it was a defining moment for me to say yes to that, because I would not have had the career that I had because if I had missed that opportunity. Another defining moment for me really was when I was asked to take on internal audit as well as ethics and compliance. And that gave me more executive breadth, gave me more expertise and experience in risk management, and really elevated me to a level, an executive level, where I was seen as a trusted advisor. And so opportunities will come your way, and there are some that you absolutely should say yes to, and there might be some that you should say no to, but any that increase your breadth, your ability to gain context, or increase your connections throughout the organization are those that I think you should say yes to. David, your thoughts? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. When I think about that question and look back, almost everything I did that worked out well for career and as a learning experience, both as a professional and a person, involved a degree of risk-taking. So I left a very comfortable law firm partnership for a job that no one had ever lasted more than 2 years at. So that was a risk. I once went to work for someone and became his direct report, knowing that he had been campaigning to have me fired for the last year. I agreed to be SECO at the company when I didn't know, nor did anyone else in the company, the first thing about ethics and compliance. I'd never heard of the federal sentencing guidelines. If you had given me 2 hours, I wouldn't have been able to find them. I also remember telling a room full of litigators defending literally $1 trillion in class action suits that we ought to admit that smoking kills and is addictive. I wasn't very popular that day, but it was the right thing to do for both the company and the world, and it worked out. And I also told our CEO at one point that he simply needed to stop saying that senior executives had left the company to, quote, pursue other interests or to spend time with their family, and just to be straight about the fact that they had violated our code of conduct and behaved in ways that undermined our values. And again, that was risky at the time, but it's something that people in that company still talk about today as kind of not only a defining moment for ethics and compliance, but for the company.
So, I've worked with you, David, now for a couple of years, and, you continue to help me with what we call soft skills. It's something that I'm trying to evolve with every day. But, I mentioned that in my intro about it's not just about qualifications or positions, but it's about soft skills. So, in your mind, Ellen, what soft skills are most important for E&C practitioners? And not just saying about chief compliance officers. I mean, when you start out at all levels.
Yeah, I think there's 4 of them. This really comes from Ron Carlucci in some of the studies he's done about what makes executives successful. But it's having breadth. It's seeing how all the different pieces of the organization fit together. It's having context, being able to understand where people are coming from and what matters to them. It's choice, being able to make good decisions, knowing what to say yes to, what risks to take, and what to say no to. And then it's connection. And connection is all about the relationships. And I think it's the foundation for the other 3. If you don't have connection, you don't get the breadth, you don't get the context, and then you can't make good choices. And so all of those also, I think, are just fundamental to always being curious, not only about the business, but the people who are in it, and learning about them and what they want and what they need, and trying to figure out how you can work with them as collaboratively as possible, so everybody's getting what they want and they need. David?
Probably will say a lot of the same things in a slightly different way. So here's my list of 4. Building skill at influencing without formal authority. We live in a world now where formal authority is much less powerful. And I think E&C is well positioned to understand how you can influence without being in charge. Building coalitions and relationships inside and outside the company. Sometimes those outside the company relationships are really crucial in terms of giving one ideas, strategies, tactics that have worked elsewhere. Getting into the minds of the C-suite and the board. Probably nothing more important than understanding how the senior leaders and the governing body of a company or organization are looking at things. And last, I'd say, understanding company culture and the levers that can influence it. At the end of the day, I would argue that when everything else is done in terms of excellence in E&C, culture still matters more than anything else. And if you're not playing in the culture game, then I think you're not really having influence in the company. And overall, I would say it's part of the classic and long time challenge of E&C, which is to ensure that ethics and compliance is part of the business, not a program attached to the business.
So, you talk about culture, and you both talked about culture in some way about, when you're in an organization to understand it, but that's not as easy as it seems. It's the buy-in. So how do you get that buy-in? How do you, Ellen, David, when you're in a corporation, whether you're mid-level or senior level, how do you get the buy-in that culture matters and it's not just a box that needs to be ticked?
I think you have to appeal to what people's interests and motivations are, which is you've got to understand their goals and their wants and desires. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest or prove that ethical companies do better. They simply make more money. They retain the best talent. They produce the best products. They have the best ideas. They're nimble. They're able to pivot. They have resilience. All of those things are everything that every company wants. If you can't appeal to that, then maybe you've got some other issues. But I think, David's point about you have to be part of the business rather than a program attached to it, I think is really critical. You've got to understand the strategy. You've got to understand where the business is going, and you have to leverage the cultural aspects of that to make your program successful. Otherwise, you're just really, running a compliance program, maybe somewhere in the basement of the building that nobody really cares about.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite business statement is that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
You cannot graft a great compliance program onto a weak culture and think that you're going to get very far. So culture needs to be job one. And to kind of pivot to some things we'll be talking about later, I can tell you that in literally thousands of hours as a board member and hundreds of discussions, no board member independently brings up ethics and compliance in the absence of a problem, but they talk about culture all of the time and they don't always make the link. And so if we as E&C professionals can retain that mindset and always go back to that link, we are going to be much more relevant.
So that's great once you're in a company, but let's talk about when you're looking to switch gears. So Ellen, you found a new spot where you've taken your skills the last 20 years and you're going to apply them to hundreds and hundreds of companies. So they're going to benefit from your kind of experience. But before you have that experience, and always a topic of discussion about whether it's now as valuable or as relevant as it was before, will a JD continue to be as important for gaining a top level E&C position? And if you don't, are there any other strategies to give yourself that street credibility in terms of a kind of a legal mindset in E&C to compete for those top positions?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing a shift away from the JD as the requirement to be an ethics and compliance professional. But what I think is key is you have to demonstrate your intellectual curiosity, your risk-taking, and your ability to be creative. Going out for certifications, there are many universities now that offer non-legal, LMS certifications. There are all kinds of professional organizations that also offer certifications. I think the thing, and I know what I look for when I look at a resume, is I don't want someone who's been stagnant. If you've just gotten your college degree and you've done nothing else that shows me how you're investing in yourself to build your skills and your talents, then I'm a little worried. But I think really, the key when we think about the future of ethics and compliance is having a diverse set of experiences and knowledge. You need the people who are great auditors. You need the folks who are data analytics. You need some of the folks that are really involved in behavioral science. And a JD degree isn't going to give you that. Although if you have a JD degree, you might be able to learn some of those other things, as well as any other degree. So I think that's what's key, is that you really show you've got dedication to learning and an intellectual curiosity.
So as a lawyer, David, what do you say?
Yeah, I wasn't a very good lawyer, so not sure it matters as much as people think. I think a lot of lawyers have gotten thrown into compliance, and there's been kind of a just kind of a virtuous or vicious cycle, because once lawyers started being compliance officers, they looked to other lawyers. And there's obviously a legal component to compliance, but it's not very important by itself. It's not that hard to learn. And I agree with Ellen. I think breadth and specific chops in an area like financial, in an area like ESG. Boards, if you listen to board discussions now, you'll hear the letters ESG more than most other letters of the alphabet. And I go back to the ability to translate business strategy into ethics and compliance strategy and action. And there I would say lawyers not only have no comparative advantage, they probably have a comparative disadvantage, because they're not very good about it. The way they think doesn't necessarily translate. And I think understanding the overall machine that runs the company and how E&C can be an integral part of that machine is the most important thing, and much more important than any single kind of background.
So, we touched upon some areas of expertise, whether it's soft skills and the JD, the hard skill. As you all may know, every year LRN produces what we call our PEI report, which is our program effectiveness report. And what that does, it examines how E&C programs, meet new challenges. So this year was COVID, but it also identifies where there's room for improvement. Showcases case studies from organizations that pivoted quickly to kind of ensure those programs didn't miss a beat as challenges arose. So with all this change, and David, you mentioned ESG, and we're talking about soft skills, what kind of subject matter expertise do you think is going to be in the greatest demand over the next few years? Because we're looking at how programs are developing, and we're looking at the new risks that are coming out. So should people be or aspiring compliance and ethics professionals, should they be investing in this in new expertise areas?
I'll start on that one. Ellen's already mentioned data and data science, and obviously everything related to specific and tangible benchmarks and dashboards and data is becoming increasingly important. I would also say, though, that, as I said, ESG is so on the minds of boards. They don't really know what it means or how to make sense of it, but they know it's important. They know there are demands coming from outside, and leadership in how to make that tangible and effective is really key. Cybersecurity is going to be an issue that challenges companies from now till forever. The whole digital marketplace. So all of those things. And then I would also say, I continue to believe that the most important aspect of ethics and compliance is trying to understand human behavior as it plays out in an organization with lots and lots of conflicting priorities and demands. And so if our E&C profession can really become the experts on how humans behave in organizations and ways to influence that in the right direction, we will always be relevant and important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when we look at what we're calling the work quake or the great resignation, I think the things that we're going to face is, why do our employees want to work for our companies? And if we can't demonstrate through our actions that we value them, that there is organizational justice throughout the organization, shows the commitment to the values, we're going to see the talent walk out the door. So I think there's an ethics quake on the way, where not only employees but other stakeholders are going to hold companies accountable when their actions don't align with their values. And so we have to go well beyond the nice poster in the hallway and the fancy code of conduct to really demonstrate that value and demonstrate fair treatment throughout the organization. And that has a tie into the ESG piece, but also really is about, do we understand that when we put out policies and procedures, how they affect people's ability to work and do the right thing. So behavioral science is key, data science is key, and understanding how people interpret the information, the PR piece, is also going to be very, very valuable. I really think that when you think of ethics and compliance, the protection and the safeguarding of reputation has now become front and center.
So I mentioned earlier, Ellen, that you and I met as part of a Women in the Boardroom Roundtable, where I was helping advise senior women to get into the boardroom. But let's talk more about the ethics compliance profession. So seeing as women now probably hold, I don't know, 60% of E&C positions, what are ways that women can more effectively prepare and compete for those top level positions to increase their visibility and their influence at those high levels?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's really different for women than it is for men, because I think the board and the executive team is looking for certain characteristics of executives regardless of what their personal demographics are. And I talked a little bit about them. It's that breadth, that context, the choice, and the connection. But I also think that one of the things that we do as ethics and compliance people, because it's kind of like going to band camp or summer camp, we love to spend time with each other, but you really need to spend time with other leaders. You need to get to know the CFO. You need to get to know the CEO. And if you have an opportunity to get to know your board members and build those relationships, that's critical, because at the high executive level and the board level, quite frankly, you're really not probably going to be considered unless there is a strong personal reference. Either somebody is recommending you because they've worked with you and they know your talents, or when the board is checking you out, they're going to call somebody. And if you don't get a very strong reference, it isn't going to be helpful to you. So it goes back to that connection piece. It's about those relationships. And I would encourage anybody, no matter what level of the ethics and compliance profession you're in or what your professional goals are, is to constantly think about broadening your relationships with people in different fields and different industries.
So let's broaden that a little bit now, because, we talked a little bit about expertise. We talked a little bit about JD versus soft skills, but let's look at, probably the majority of the people listening to this call today are in the E&C space. They're probably a compliance officer, compliance manager, director, VP, however you want to shape that, I would imagine there's a large proportion of those people who are looking to their future, and not the next 2 years, but the next 5 or 10 years. We mentioned about being board ready. We mentioned about having that relationship with the C-suite and building those relationships. So, we did a report with Tapestry Networks a few months back that David was leading. And we kind of discovered that there was only about 8 or 9 public company board members that were former CECOs. And, David, we've been talking for a while about the consensus about what is their value add as a board member. So maybe you can talk not so much, what the value add is, but, as Anand started to talk about, how do you get there? And, this isn't I want to be a board member next year. This is, I want to be a board member in 6-7 years time. How do I start now?
Yeah, so I think the themes that build careers also build future potential as a board member. So it involves broadening. What do you bring to the table, and what would you bring to the board table beyond ethics and compliance? When I look at the 8 or 9 men and women who've made it from being a CECO onto a public company board, they all brought something else to the table. They brought financial chops, they brought enterprise risk management chops, they brought legal chops, they brought public affairs chops, they brought ESG chops. So I think, as Ellen has emphasized a couple of times, opportunities to broaden and build on your kind of array of expertise and capabilities is going to be important. No one has gotten onto a board simply because they were a chief compliance officer. It's been part of a package, part of a career. So, and then I would also underscore what Ellen said, which is building relationships with your C-suite and with your board, because you don't pass go if you don't get a table pounding recommendation from those people who know you well. I would say that the other, I think those are the main keys. It is about relationships. It's about deep relationships. I would be talking to anyone who is in senior management or on a board and ask them how they get there. The other thing I should mention is that every CECO who has made it onto a board has done so from the C-suite. So you probably are going to have to chart your career journey to the C-suite if you hope to springboard from there onto a board. Some of the specific examples, because people on the call on the webinar may know some of these people. Melissa Barnes, who came from Eli Lilly onto the board of Algonquin Utilities, brought to the table litigation, regulatory, and ERM skills. Julie Kane, who came from PG&E onto a public company pharma board, brought strong litigation and legal background, and also had helped a company through bankruptcy in crisis. Diana Sands, who went from Boeing to a couple of boards, has a very strong accounting and finance set of capabilities. Leo McKay from Lockheed Martin, who's on two public company boards now, has a finance audit and enterprise risk management. I know that when I made it to one of my 3 boards, it was the fact that I had driven corporate strategy, that I had been in a lead role with respect to society, government, communications, environment, and even the fact that I had a history of relationships with people who normally fight corporate interests was important. So it's that sort of rounded senior executive who brings a lot to the table, and part of that being ethics and compliance.
So that's great. And, the advice of, be more involved, speak to the board, grow relationships. But Helen, how do you've just got your first job as either a chief ethics compliance officer, a senior ethics director. How do you path that way to make time for your board? How do you convince your C-suite that you having time in front of the board, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour every quarter, is going to be valuable to them? How do you start? Because I'm sure there are 60, 100 people in the audience saying, okay, that's great advice, but what's the first step?
Well, you need an ally. The first step is to have somebody present it to the board as their idea instead of yours. And that goes a long way. So when the audit chair says, I'd really want to hear from the ethics and compliance team, or I want to hear from the SECO or the person who's in the day-to-day responsibilities, then that's more likely to happen than you say, I want agenda time. I think the other way to approach that is to think about those topics that the board has a great interest in, and can you inform or educate them on that? So one of the things that I would do is, if there was a particularly interesting and well-written article, I would send that to the chair of all of the committees. And that gets you an entree, because they go, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that from somebody else. And of course, the other piece is trying to build that relationship. If you can't get in agenda time, can you go to the cocktail party? Can you be invited to lunch? Are there other ways that you can at least begin to build that relationship? And that's, I think, the way that you've got to do it is make it seem as if it's just a natural idea. Of course, why wouldn't you be on the agenda? And of course, it's their idea, not yours.
So David, you've been on the other side. You're a board member, so I'm assuming. I mean, one of our other panelists, John Gilmore, will probably go into more detail later. But I've run hundreds of different roundtables with board members talking about what they want to know and what they want to hear. What do you want to hear from a chief compliance officer, David, as an audit committee chair or as a governance committee chair? What will give you that spotlight for them that you'll remember them?
Yeah, so I mean, board considerations, board members, board mindsets are all about the biggest picture of the company, the strategic view of the company. And anyone who wants time, attention, and priority needs to model that mindset and think about how their piece of the company contributes importantly to strategy. If all ethics and compliance leaders have to talk about is how many calls to the helpline, how many cases, how many people trained, they're headed in the wrong direction. So my advice to the E&C community is E&C is actually a very big issue. It's about the way behavior works in the company, how it can go bad and how it can go well and contribute to the purpose and results of the company. And so my mantra to the E&C world has been, you need to play big. If you play small, you will be treated small. You need to play big. And we've talked a few times about culture. If you don't present ethics and compliance as an essential part of driving the right culture, you probably will never be board relevant. If you do, and you have insights into culture and insights into how culture can be made more effective, then you become extremely relevant and a wanted guest, not someone who is pounding on the door and no one's answering. So I mean, I think in every company, the question ought to be, what is the most accurate but large conception of what we are about in E&C? And how does that connect to the overall purpose, mission, values, and strategy of the company? And if you can build a relationship from that foundation, you will have much better entree, access, and relationship.
I think Alan made a good point earlier that it's articulating that the business case for E&C. It's the better we are, the better we do.
Absolutely. And as you know, there's LRN and other data that demonstrates that pretty forcefully. And I can tell you, board members are still surprised when they hear that. So as much as we may think that case has been made, it hasn't been made on the other side of the table.
So we've got, I think, 2 minutes left. I had one question, and for both of you, you both talked about your career defining moments or your career building moments. So if you had a kind of spark, Alan, a spark of advice to give your compliance officer on the call right now to say, when you get into the office, virtual or real, tomorrow, how should your planning start? What should you be doing? We mentioned allies, we mentioned soft skills, we mentioned relationship building with the board, but say you're not quite there yet. You're not in the C-suite, so you haven't got that reach. What's the first thing that you should be doing, apart from obviously reading Lisa Beth Lentini Walker's book about communicating, but what should we all be doing?
I think there's two things. I think is one, draft your resume for 5 years from now and start to draft your board bio. And that will figure out where your gaps are. And then you look at the gaps and you figure out, well, how are you going to fill them? David?
David, last words?
Yeah, what I would say is try to deepen your understanding and the C-suite and board's understanding of the difference between the company culture as it is today and the culture that the company aspires to, and some of the steps that might help get there. Because I think that's a conversation that happens at the highest levels, and we should, as E&C, be part of that.
Brilliant. Well, Alan and David, thank you so much. It's been very valuable just listening to some, actual insights from people who've, been in the field, not just anecdotal. We haven't had any time for questions, I'm afraid, but I'm sure if you do have questions that you could forward them to Ernie at ECI, and I'm sure Alan and David or myself will follow them up. So I appreciate your time today. I'm going to pass it back to Ernie, and again, thanks all for having me.
Thank you so much, Ty. Thank you, Ty, David, Ellen. Just really great, deep points, I think, in your session. And so what I'd like to do now is to share a video. It's about a 7-minute video about ECI resources that are available to people to accelerate their career growth. So let's cue that up.
Thank you, Ernie. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about how associations, whether professional or trade, can be a resource for you, a partner in helping you build a successful career path in the ethics and compliance profession. Associations have been around a long time. Partially for that reason is they do what they do really well. They bring people together from like-minded interests to go beyond what you could do individually. So some things that associations can do from you, they can help you add value to your organization. You can help strengthen your organization through the interactions you have with your association. You can grow as a professional, you can learn more and continue on a path of lifelong learning. And finally, you can go out and network and develop relationships with peers from around the world. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about ECI and our resources that we make available to you. But there are a lot of associations that may be of interest, and you can apply all of this to any association that works for you. One thing that associations do tremendously well is that they are conveners. When you join an organization such as ECI, you are joining a global community. So whether you work at a small business or a multinational global enterprise, your interactions will deepen your perspective on ethics and compliance. Here at ECI, our membership is located in at least 125 countries. And to add to that depth, we have members at all experience levels, from newcomers to the chief ethics and compliance officers. And not only that, our members represent a diversity of industries from around the world. So your interaction in this global community adds tremendous depth and perspective that you cannot find elsewhere. Who you know can be as important as what you know in your career, and your association can serve as a venue to help you build your network of professional relationships. So whether it's seeking a mentor, considering the next steps in your career path, or phoning a friend with a thorny work issue, your association can be a resource to help you expand your professional network. Here are some ways an association can help you make connections. Consider volunteering. It doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. Many associations offer micro-volunteer opportunities. Engage in meetings. And by engage in meetings, I don't mean attend meetings, which is important, but participate in meetings. Have your camera on in virtual webinars. In the breakout rooms, participate in the discussions. Get to meet people and get to be known. Likewise, if your association has online communities, participate in them. Not only should you post content, but more importantly, respond to others' posts. Be a resource for your network, and you'll have a resource to turn back to when you need it. Consider joining a working group. And this is an ECI member benefit of professionals who gather to research a topic, and they work for 6 to 9 months in a year, and they publish a white paper. So again, you have an opportunity to meet a lot of new professionals, work on a project together, learn new perspectives, and publish a report. Likewise, interact on social media. Follow your association's social media accounts, but also post content. Tag other professionals, tag other associations to really amplify who you are and your expertise that you bring to the field. And lastly, think locally. Many states and regions have local groups. Consider participating in them and developing a local network for you to turn to. Boosting your professional profile really goes hand in hand with building your professional network. We run on volunteer power. That's a common expression in the association community, and volunteering can be a great way to gain visibility and reinforce your expertise. So consider the following ways you can raise your professional profile. Contribute to published white papers, blogs, and research for your association. This is an ECI benefit, but participate in a peer leadership group. Peer leadership groups are a member benefit for fellows, and they are small groups that meet for about 6 months to discuss leadership issues. And it's a great way to establish a new network and raise your visibility among other chief ethics and compliance officers. And finally, consider other ways to demonstrate your leadership and expertise, such as speaking opportunities at events throughout the year, serving in advisory groups, and board service. Professional development has long been a core component of associations. Be sure to tap into the resources available not only to stay informed, but stay ahead of the trends and topics that are important to you and your profession. Here are some ways ECI can help. Read the Global Business Ethic Survey Report to understand global trends in workplace culture. Stay up to date with the Ethics Stats emails that come up to date, reporting the latest findings from the ECI Research Department. Be sure to attend best practice forums on emerging issues. Be sure to use the ECI document library that houses an archive of all ECI white papers, research reports, and other findings. And subscribe and read the ECI Daily Brief that will deliver into your inbox a global perspective of the latest news around ethics and compliance issues. A very visible way to stand out in your profession is to obtain certification in your industry or area of interest. Whether that is ECI's Leadership, Professional, and Ethics and Compliance certification or other certifications, they can help reinforce your expertise and your commitment to your chosen career path. Even if a particular certification is not required for a job opportunity, it can at times help distinguish you from among other candidates. Also, be sure to build in the necessary time to track your continuing education hours throughout the year. Again, your associations can be a tremendous resource to support and help you earn your continuing education hours. Lastly, be sure to use your association's career resources. ECI's Career Center has resources for both the employer and the job seeker. If you're looking to hire, ECI's job board attracts hundreds of qualified candidates who are there to read and look for their next opportunity. You can also search our resume database to help you identify specific qualifications that you are seeking. If you are looking for your next opportunity, use the Career Center to search hundreds of E&C jobs that are posted there. Upload your anonymous resume to our resume database, and you can set up automated job alerts that deliver notifications to you when a job is posted that meets your criteria, whether that's by industry, job role, or geography. And lastly, ECI does offer resume review and writing resources through our Career Center. Well, that sums up some of the ways your association can be a resource for you and your career. This PowerPoint should be in the handouts, and they are linked to the resources. Or you can always email membership@ethics.org, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you, and now back off to you, Ernie.
Thank you very much. And that was Dan Wolfman. He's the Vice President of Membership at the ECI. And I'd like to just add a couple of personal reflections. When I look back on my career, and I was in the corporate ethics and compliance space for 11 years, I didn't even get into ethics and compliance until I was in my late 40s. But everything I did had prepared me for that. And I believe that has been my home and where I was supposed to work for these years. I would say that the professional associations have been one of the greatest benefits for me in evolving my career. I think I made my first conference presentation maybe a year or two after I got into the field, because you always have something to share, sometimes a unique, differentiated kind of a skill or experience that can shed some light or move the conversation forward. I think also leadership opportunities. As I secured leadership opportunities in the professional associations, a lot of times other people recognized that first in me before I recognized it in myself. And so I would encourage you to lean into that. Join local and regional ethics and compliance groups. I co-founded one in San Antonio because there wasn't one available. That was 12 years ago. And so that is another arena for you to develop and hone your skills and deepen your networking. A couple of things I'd like to add before we go on to our next session is I think it's very useful to think about our role as an advisory role, that we really succeed and we grow our reputation by virtue of our ability to help people solve problems and seize upon opportunities. And then also the importance of creating energizing interactions. And I'm going to give a little plug for a book that just came out in September, Beyond Collaboration Overload, How to Work Smarter, Get Ahead, and Restore Your Well-Being by Rob Cross, who is a leader in world leader in global organizational network analysis. And what he says is that it's really important in organizations to develop these energizing interactions. And you know what those are because you've experienced them, as a contrast to de-energizing interactions. They're where you're focusing on purpose, to where you are getting into a state of flow, and it actually pulls business to you. It's not something we typically associate with ethics and compliance, being an energizing experience for people. And I think there's a lot of possibility by looking at it that way. What Cross said was that people who engage in the energizing interactions are 3 to 4 times as likely as non-energizers to achieve top performance ratings. And they're 2 to 3 times as likely to successfully manage their career transitions. And so you are part of an embedded network, and understanding that and leaning into that through your advisory capacity is really critical. And so now I'd like to introduce our next session, our next segment, our last segment. We have John Gilmore with us, a co-founder and a managing partner of Barker Gilmore, an executive search firm that specializes in general counsel and compliance positions. With over 3 decades of executive search experience, he's got a reputation as being one of the top executive search consultants for general counsel and chief compliance officer placements, and he actually works in many different sectors of the economy. We also have with us Heidi Ollinger, senior advisor at Barker Gilmore. She spent more than 3 decades at McDonald's Corporation, most recently as a global chief compliance officer there. And she also is serving as a board member now, kind of a post-career in many ways like Ellen. And so welcome, John. It's wonderful to have you here at the Ethics and Compliance Initiative. You're on mute. You can come off mute now.
Sorry about that. I can't even believe that I let that get by me. But thank you so much for the invitation to participate today. We couldn't be more thrilled here with Heidi. And Heidi has just such a great reputation and so much material to share. So as Ernie mentioned, Barker Gilmore, we're just a very unique firm out there, establishing a relationship or reputation nationwide for executive search for the chief compliance officers and general counsel, but also the coaching and advising services that our great team of former general counsel and chief compliance officers add to people. And one thing, I just getting to know ECI now, just an amazing service that you guys offer, and hearing everything from Ty's panel and Ellen and David. I just say such spot on comments that everyone can really take to the bank. So really, really great material. And I'll also just offer up, in case I forget at the end, is if anybody needs some help as far as coaching, advising, or just some consulting as far as prepping for an interview or a question about an opportunity, feel free after the call. It doesn't cost anything. I'm happy to help people out. Our firm, our mission statement is we're committed to the advancement of others. And if I can help somebody along the way, I'm happy to do so. So all that said, I definitely like to introduce Heidi. Heidi's a really terrific member of our team.
Thank you, John. I am the former Global Chief Compliance Officer at McDonald's, and I started the function. So I know the job you do day to day. I also know the challenges you have. As a senior advisor with Barker Gilmore, I provide advice and assistance with compliance programs and executive professional development coaching. And that has been a very rewarding part of my life and career. I enjoy helping others, and it's been a great affiliation. And I also serve on 2 public boards. So I'm one of those individuals they mentioned earlier that are listed on the NASDAQ. And I'm a trustee with DePaul University here in Chicago. And I really appreciated David and Ellen and Ty's comments a few minutes ago, because they were all spot on. And I was very lucky, but also strategically lucky to be able to get on these 2 public boards. And so we're hoping that, the information we provide today can help you continue to advance your career aspirations and help you in continuing to advance your compliance position at your organization. John?
Yeah, one of the, so first starting off with some of the market trends, I get called often from the different media asking, looking for something spicy that one particular industry is really, really hot right now. And, the one thing I'll just say is that it's just, the market in general is very hot for both CCOs and deputies. Everyone's succession planning is in the limelight right now. And there is definitely a big push for diversity. So right now, for example, we have everything from all these different emerging growth companies that are out there. So everyone's trying to do things different, whether it's fintechs doing things different, whether it's transportation companies, the consumer companies, and shopping's changing. So there's so many different changes that are going on. And what we find is that people are just, they want to always be doing something new and different, and having that opportunity to be attracted to building a compliance program for something that's new and different seems to really get people excited. I think Ellen actually said it really well earlier, where she said, as far as hiring goes, it's not about whether if there's a difference in how they assess talent, whether it's a woman or a male. The assessment's the exact same. Our job as recruiters is to identify the best possible person for the position, and hopefully that person is diverse. I mean, they're looking for diversification. You look at some of these major corporations, executive leadership teams, and you see a lot of old white guys, and nobody wants a leadership team that's made of old white guys. So everyone's looking at these people under the exact same lens. There's not a double standard here, and there's some amazing talent that's out there. And one of the things that I'm actually really thrilled about is CEOs and boards are open to people who aren't sitting CCOs, but these people who've been properly trained to become a CCO by their CCO and by their board and executive leadership team. So there's more opportunity out there for people now than ever before. I'll just say that one of the challenges for us right now from a recruiting standpoint is this whole moving, the relocation aspect. And yeah, it's tough. The housing situation right now, buying a house in a different market, it's not an easy move, but I think, as David said, as far as taking that risk, taking a risk for an opportunity that could change everything for you, help you build a program that no one's ever thought of before, or taking a program to the next level, getting involved with one of these fast moving industries, it's a really big deal. I think the risk really out there is reputational risk. Obviously, it's reputational risk for the company that they hire the right person, but also it's reputational risk of the CCO. And I'll just say that whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, if you work for a company that's in the press for the wrong reasons, it's a ding against the CCO. And people go back and look. I have financial services companies, for example, look at the regulators and any regulatory claims against them, and they want to see, was that person there in the seat when that happened? So reputational risk is everything for the individual and the company. And I'll just say that from an opening standpoint, we see the most openings where the risk tolerance of the CCO did not align with the risk tolerance of the executive leadership team, especially the CEO. And that's where things fall apart. So, we see we are backfilling positions where people are leaving organizations for something that is thrilling, like these pre-IPO opportunities to be involved with social media or transportation or retail shopping and all these different exciting opportunities. So that does happen, obviously, and if there isn't a potential successor, they do want to benchmark against external talent, and they do want to see a diverse slate of candidates. So there's a lot going on there. I'm trying to rush through this since I want to get to my key points to help you in an interview process. But I'll just say that the CEOs that you would be interviewing with, one of their primary concerns is, will this person impede business or enable business? And if a person is perceived as being overly putting too many policies in place and putting too many restrictions on the business. It really does make a CEO quite nervous, and the likelihood is you're not going to get the position. The other thing that I heard on the first session was that about being data driven. And yes, the CEO is very mindful of being these people who are data driven. So it's data and metrics driven from the standpoint of how are you measuring the success of your team and the performance of each individual on your team? And also, how are you measuring the overall performance of the compliance program? So some of the different trends out there. We also heard about the priorities of ESG and DEI and securities. I don't want to steal Heidi's thunder. I'm sure she's going to go into this, but yes, absolutely, those are big deals out there. And so having certifications certainly makes a big difference on your resume. When it comes to leadership, I'll just say leadership is very important. And here's how I measure leadership. Here's how I measure leadership, and here's how I measure how good a company is to work for. I measure both by this. How good are the people that they're able to attract? And how strong are they? How talented are they? What kind of credentials do they have? And number two, how long do those people stick around? And you can take that to the bank, because a company that's able to attract top tier talent and they stick around for the long term, you can rest assured you're going to work for a really great organization. As far as like do's and don'ts when it comes to interviewing, we heard about the soft skills. Soft skills definitely make a big difference. I'll say this, it's a combination of gravitas and the soft skills. And from a soft skill standpoint, we've actually narrowed it down in our assessment to emotional intelligence. And the different areas of emotional intelligence truly are an amazing indicator whether someone's going to be successful or not successful as the CCO. And I'll go through a few of these things, because as we go through these steps, you'll see that it really does align. So number one, do they have good listening skills? So number one failure, number one reason why people aren't getting these jobs, they come in and they talk too much. So it really needs to be a good 50-50 conversation. And I have to warn people, just as much as it's bad to talk too much, it's also bad if the interviewer talks too much and you don't get a chance to show what you're made of. So it really needs to be a good 50-50 conversation. We heard earlier about relationship building, and relationship building is really an amazing component to this. And here's how we determine if someone has a good relationship building skills. I want to learn who during the interview process, who do you have relationships with? Especially from the past. So, do you when you go to the city where you worked your first job, do you meet the CFO for lunch or breakfast? Do you have these relationships from the past with people that liked you because of the work you did, they respected you, and do they keep that relationship? So I want to hear about the relationships from the past just as much as I want to hear about the relationships from the future. And good people will be in touch with good people from the past. So I think that's a really good indicator. The being humble, totally critical. We're looking for people who aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves. We're not looking for people who just want to manage, but we want people who want to do things. And one of my tips about being humble, most times on an interview, you're asked, what is your greatest strength? Or where can you bring this where can you make the biggest impact on my business? And one of my tips, it's not my tip, one of my genius candidates came up with it in the past, is when you're asked that question, never answer referring to your identity. Your identity is what you think of yourself. Your reputation is what others think of you. So what most people, when you're asked, what's your greatest strength? The first two words they say is, I think I'm this. And that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is referring to your reputation, meaning what have others shared with you? Well, one of the things the CEO regularly tells me is this. One of the things the boards gave me a special recognition at the last meeting was I did this. I actually received this promotion or this special award in the community because I did this. So referring to your reputation is a very humble way to stand on your own merits and brag about yourself. So keep that in mind. We are looking for someone that, again, is calm and cool under pressure. Anyone comes across nervous on an interview, then you're going to be nervous in front of a regulator, or you're going to be nervous in front of a board, and there's no having it. So it really needs to be someone that is calm and cool under pressure. You're able to perform at the highest levels and be confident in it. The communication skills, again, it's unfortunate, but so many people who look so incredible on paper couldn't have a better resume. It all falls apart with communication skills. So when you're going into these interviews, even if you're West Coast, and by the way, West Coast, they love to show up in their t-shirts or sweatshirts and so forth. It's very casual work environment. Put a jacket on, dress at least mostly business casual or even better. Ties obviously typically aren't required. People ask me that all the time. But you need to come in, look like a professional. You need to look like an executive. You're being hired into an executive level position. One of my other tips is when you're meeting with a CEO or anybody at the highest levels of the company, don't assume you know what they're looking for. Ask them. You know, let them bring to you what they feel are the most important criteria or most important skills necessary to come in and be successful. What do I need to do to come in and hit the ground running? And a follow-up question to that is really understanding, what do I need to have achieved after the first year so you feel you made a great hire and that I hit the ball out of the park? Another follow-up question that's always terrific to ask is the cultural fit. Can you share with me? The word share, by the way, is a very powerful word. We're taught to always share. When you're asking people to share, they will share. So can you share with me what your culture is like and what kind of person fits in best with this executive leadership team? Again, you stop and you listen, and when they're done speaking, you can hit the nail on the head with how you fit that bill. So very, very good stuff. The last thing I'll say is always interview with the objective. You're there to get the offer. Never interview where you're turning the table, interviewing the interviewer. Never use the word concern on an interview, and always go in with the objective. I'm here to get an offer. I'm here to get them excited about my candidacy. I'll figure out if I want the position when I leave. So you close that interview with 3 parts. 1, I'm very excited. I'm interested in this opportunity. 2, I'm based on what we talked about and what you need for this position to be successful, I know I can do that. And 3, I hope I get a chance to move forward in this process. So I'm interested, I'm qualified, I'm confident I have what you're looking for. I hope I get a chance to move forward. All that said, in a humble way, be direct, be personable, and make sure you don't talk too much. So with all that said, I'll pass it off to you, Haiti.
Thank you, John. And frankly, after having heard everything John said and listening to David and Ellen this morning and Ty, at the risk of being repetitive at some points, I guess I'm going to be, because some of the points are the same. But frankly, it just goes to show you that these are important. So I want to talk about your 3-dimensional self, right? So you are a compliance professional. That's the number one thing. And you have to succeed at that job first. So what does that mean? First, you have to have a passion for compliance. And that comes across quite clearly in what you do and how you are in the organization. So have a passion for compliance, number one. And if you don't, then maybe you need to look for another job or find something that you're more passionate about. We were talking a lot about building relationships, and I say, yes, build, sustain, but I really add one more component, and that is leverage those relationships. And what does that mean? Let's say that you have an initiative you need to put forward in the organization, and you need support from management and others. You should have built enough relationships with individuals that you can call upon that person and say, I need your help at this point. I want this initiative to go forward. Let me explain to you why. Let me explain why it's important. And I really would love your support. So asking someone for support on something is leveraging that relationship. And it's a two-way street. They may need your help on something in the future. You heard it from Ellen. You've heard it from David. You heard it from John. You really, really have to understand your organization's business strategies, and you have to develop your own strategic plan for your compliance integration into the business. Identify risks by business unit and provide a roadmap for risk mitigation. Talk to talk to team leaders or business unit leads and find out from them what are their risks, what do they feel is important to them so that they can continue to build on their strategies. And once you know that, if you can help them to mitigate and explain how compliance can help be integrated into that unit to help them comply with what they need to, they will be very grateful, and they'll look at you more as a partner rather than just a compliance person coming in telling them that they need to do A, B, and C. Again, you heard it from everyone else. Technology and data analytics are crucial. But I say, in addition to finding those that you can use in your group, leverage some of the ones that other teams have. HR has some data analytics that you can leverage and get information. The same for internal audit and your accounting department. So leverage all of that technology, and it'll help you do your job better, because you will be able to, if you don't have the resources, you have somewhere where you can have the data you need. You heard it from David and I, again, use your leadership skills to influence your organization's culture. That is so critical, and it bears continuing repeating. You have that leadership position in the company. You are able to influence others, and you should do that, your CEO and top management. You have to really think beyond oneself and contribute to your team's brand, meaning that you, as everyone in the group, regardless of whether you're the chief compliance officer, but anyone in compliance, should always be cognizant of the fact that you represent that compliance team. You are out there presenting the message, and the message should be consistent, and it should definitely reflect the brand that you and your team hopefully have developed for yourselves. What do you want to stand for in the organization, and how do you communicate that to everyone so that they understand what you bring to the table? Joining organizations and benchmarking. I 100% agree with both of those, and I think you should definitely benchmark either companies in your same industry or other industries, because their perspective on what they're doing in their compliance program is very important to help sometimes level set where you're at. Where is my compliance program in comparison to others? And many times that data is helpful when talking to your management, because companies compete. They want to know, what is that other company doing that competes in my circle? And if they're doing it, maybe we should. So your knowledge of what others are doing in the same space is very important, and provide some data for your company in support of what you are doing. So that part is your compliance self. Then let's talk about your professional career aspirations. I deal with a lot of compliance officers and executives who are looking to change careers, or who are looking to grow in the career they have, or in the company they're at. But the first thing you have to do in this is you have to know what you want and where you want to be in the future. I think someone mentioned that as well. If you want to be somewhere, figure it out today and say, what do I want? Is this where I want to stay? Is this the company I want to be at? And then be willing to take risks. Again, David said it, I took many risks in my career and they paid off. Taking a risk involves doing homework. If you know you're going into a new area, you have to do your homework to ensure that you are successful in it. Again, continue to enhance your strong points. If you're able to leverage some of the Hogan assessments or all the personal development assessments, you can take them, but don't just put them on the shelf. Look at them, analyze them, see what people are saying about you. If you're doing a 360 and things like that, understand your reputation, or what people are seeing, the eyes that are on you. Be a student of the business. And that not only is a student of the business from a strategic standpoint, from a financial standpoint, but look around at the leaders in your organization. Look around at those that are considered to be high potential growth individuals, and say to yourself, okay, what attributes do these people have in this company? What does this company view as a successful model? And write down all of those attributes, and then look at them and say, do I fit? And as someone said, are there gaps? Maybe I don't fit. Maybe I don't have what these other individuals have. And where is that gap? I help many of my clients understanding that and then helping them to fill in that gap for them. Understand where you have an opportunity for personal growth and what personal derailers you may have. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of what my clients have come to me for. I have clients who are in their ability to be self-aware, realize that they do not have executive presence. And that's what people have been talking about here. They know what people in the organization, they see them, and when you look at it, what they're really talking about is executive presence, that ability to have clear communication and succinct messaging. You know, we lawyers and others, we like to explain everything behind the statement. But if you want to have a longer dissertation about what you want, points you want to make, I would recommend giving them a pre-read. But when you are talking to them, stick to the hard ones, give them the bullet points, let them sink in, let them ask those questions. That shows that you're giving them the information they need in a condensed model. And frankly, people at those levels don't have time to be listening to a long dissertation on statements. Part of executive presence also has to do with expressing self-confidence. People will know if you're not self-confident in what you're saying. So you need to have that ability to express what you have with confidence and understanding. You have to have passion and commitment for what you're going to say. If you're not passionate about what you want to say or committed to the company, they will know that as well. And exhibiting poise, and I think that's part of what John was saying. You have to have emotional maturity and self-control. Those are very critical when you look at people who have executive presence. Some of my clients have a fear of speaking during meetings, and I don't mean about compliance issues, because we're good at that. We're all good at talking about compliance issues when that's the job you do. But what is critical is when you are in those meetings, in addition to the compliance issues you want to discuss, you should try to find a point that you can discuss regarding the business, because that starts to shift their opinion of you from someone who's only going to talk about compliance to someone who is who is also part of the business and who can counsel them and provide assistance in that area as well. Failing to listen for understanding. Again, a statement that has gone on, you must listen. Many of us start to get the answer or start to respond in our head before the person is done speaking. And if you're doing that, you're not listening for understanding. The individual will know that the minute you speak, because that you will make a comment that directly refutes or rebuts something that they just said. And that's very frustrating for the listener. Because they're hoping to get a point across. And many of us don't use this very critical thing during communication, and that is silence. There's nothing wrong with silence. Let them say something and let them just take it in. Be silent for a minute and then let them respond and listen. And if they ask the question, again, don't jump in. Think about what you're going to say. Becoming defensive. That's another thing I've helped my clients with. Some of them become defensive and they really want to be able to hold back. And again, that is that's the same as I just said. Sit there and listen. Stay quiet and wait. Don't become defensive, because in our job as compliance, I know, and I know everyone else knows who's on this call, we can deal with some very difficult people. So the ability to do that is critical. Inability to handle pressure. As you continue to grow in an organization, the pressure becomes more and more. And if you cannot handle pressure, then you might not be in the right job. And also pressure, they will know it. People will know you can't handle it, and they don't want people who can't handle pressure. Displaying arrogance. Again, be humble. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. People know you have the credentials. That's why you're there. That's why they put you in position. So just be humble and communicate as best you can without being. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another aspect of coaching. While I do one-to-one, there is this another wonderful tool that companies provide, and that is peer leadership coaching. That is small group coaching, and some people may feel more comfortable in that arena. It provides a learning interaction among leaders who aren't necessarily from the same company or team, but are generally equal in experience and position. A safe atmosphere for honest and constructive feedback is always a great way to go if that's what you like. And it allows you to practice those new leadership skills I was talking about, like communicating and listening skills. So, consider that as well if you're uncomfortable with a one-on-one and if you would feel better in a larger group. It is a great tool as well. If you recognize any of these opportunities that I've mentioned here, do something for yourself. If you think you have an opportunity in changing in improving your executive presence, in your communication skills, then you owe it to yourself, as everyone has said here today, to do something for yourself. What does that mean? That could be anything. That could be taking your professional development seriously, looking at tools that you could use to improve those areas of opportunity. Maybe it's peer coaching, maybe it's one-on-one coaching, but you owe it to yourself to do something. If you aspire to be on the board of directors of a public company, you have to start that today, as someone said. It is not something you're going to jump into immediately while you perhaps are a chief compliance officer, but you can. But many companies, don't like their officers to be on boards, but that's a whole different thing. But if you can, when you're able to do it in the future, you have to start positioning yourself today. And then for those of you who do report to the board of directors as a board member, I would like to see, I would like information from my compliance officer about the risks. It's my job to oversee risks in the organization. I want to know, what are those risks? What are you working on? How has your program helped to mitigate the risks at this company? And what has changed in the organization as a result of your compliance efforts? What have you done? Again, that's kind of tooting your own horn, but sometimes you have to do that. And how can the board help the compliance team? What can we do to help you do your job? Are you short on resources? Do you need more messaging from us? We like to hear that. And ESG was mentioned many times by David. It's a critical part of compliance. It's a critical part of what the board is looking at these days. We want to know that someone in the organization is handling it and that we can rest assured in those areas. So, at this point, I do appreciate the time to speak with you. And I'd like to turn it over to Ernie if there's any questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. All I can say is, wow. I mean, so much valuable content, I think, for people to use in terms of managing their career. And I'd like to accelerate into a question that we have, because we've only got probably about 5 minutes left. And so one of the questions here is, we talked about so many things there, John and Heidi, that really are applicable to people at any level. I mean, regardless of where you are in an organization, I think that people can use the great wisdom that you shared in their own careers and interviewing. But a little bit about the executive search process. So we have a question here. Are you, for John, are you predominantly working for a corporation, actively looking for a specific role, or can an aspirational E&C professional or GC just call you up and send you their resume? And I'm sure the answer lies somewhere in between, but people don't understand sometimes about how executive search actually works. So can you comment on that?
Oh, sure. That's a great question, actually. So we do work on behalf of the corporations who pay our fee. But that said, my job all day long, all the people in our company, we're out meeting people all day long who aren't quite interested or right for the opportunity that we have at hand. And we want to know what is the right opportunity for them. And when we see that opportunity, we come back around and share the details with them. Confidentiality is the benchmark of our business, so nothing is ever shared outside of our company without written authorization. But I actually counsel people to reach out to a number of recruiters. We work on a retained basis, so we'll have an opportunity that our competitors won't have. they'll have opportunities that I won't have. So it's worth having your profile on in the databases for multiple companies so that they're aware of you and your interests and strengths. And when the opportunity comes around, and it might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be 2 years, but it just keeps your head down doing what you're doing best. And we reach out when we have something that's applicable.
So what kinds of questions should somebody be asking if they're interested in looking for an executive search firm? How do they evaluate that? Because I know that one thing is that I think that 95% of your placements are still on the job after a certain period of time, right?
Well, that's what we're most proud of, is our stick rate. And the stick rate means two things. One is our assessment spot on, that we're putting the right people in the right position. But two, we take it real personal that we want people to succeed in their career and be happy in their career. If the opportunity is right and the shoe fits, that's great. If it's not, we're the first to be candid and say, this isn't the right opportunity for you. So yeah, the stick rate really is, if someone goes in and aligns exactly well with that executive leadership team, where it's the right cultural fit and they have the right skills and abilities, it's going to be a great long-term relationship.
Yeah, it's all about laying the foundation first and practicing. It's important for people to practice telling their story.
Yeah, I think one thing too is to add on to that, Ernie, the way you led that off, or what are the questions you should ask the search consultants? And I would say get a sense for some of the placements that they've done. On the client side, that's the first thing the client wants to know is, what have you done for others that might be similar to what we're looking for? So we benchmark our ability to fill these positions based on the work that we've done, and we're happy to share that work with other people. So if the other search consultant doesn't have a really great track record with similar companies that you might be interested in, they may or may not be the right person. How long they've been around doing the work, and just getting a better sense of their reputation in the marketplace.
Yeah, great suggestions. Haiti, I have a last question for you, and then we'll close this out. Looking back over your career, what's the one piece of advice that you would want to give your younger self starting out? If you had an opportunity to get that word back to your younger self, and you only had one thing to share, what would that be?
I guess it is continue to take the risks. You should, whatever comes your way, take the risks that and then study up on it. Don't go in blind. Don't go in blind on anything, and really look and see, is this something that suits me? When I moved into the international area at McDonald's, I was the general counsel for Latin America. I didn't know anything about international law. I never practiced in that area, but I took the risk, and learning that new area was critical to my future, because it gave me the most well-rounded background at the company to be the compliance officer years later.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and hopefully your younger self will take that advice, if not in this universe, in a parallel one. And I just really feel that if this is the career for you, that it can be very challenging and difficult, and that's okay. But there is an aspect of the work doing you, and you don't do the work. It has almost a magical quality to it. And I hope that everybody on the call today experiences that magical quality and takes advantage of the resources and the great advice and counsel that are available out there to intentionally lean into and manage your career. Thank you to our sponsor, LRN Corporation, and to John, Haiti, David, Ellen, Dan, and Ty, to my excellent co-moderator. And we have a number of events coming up, including our November 18th Best Practice Forum, Creating Psychological Safety, Speak Up, Listen Up Strategies. And the listen up is something we don't talk enough about. And we have a leading edge series on enterprise risk management and ESG related risks on November 2nd and 3rd. Alyssa's noting the link to the ECI's event page in the chat. to register for the BPF or other upcoming events. And a final reminder to take our quick survey before leaving. It's been a really enlightening conversation. I have writer's cramp from trying to note everything that you all talked about. What a great session. And thank you to all of the folks in our audience who joined us today. Have a great day.
Thank you.